Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says that the aid for Ukraine is one of the biggest issues that the United States has faced in a long, long time. In an exclusive interview with my colleague from the Hill, Alexander Bolton, McConnell said that he got more Republican votes in the Senate than he actually expected, despite former President Donald Trump's opposition. Now, the foreign aid bill's future in the House of Representatives is incredibly uncertain. The GOP House Speaker, Mike Johnson, has lambasted the legislation, even as moderates discuss ways to outmaneuver the politically weakened speaker who is ruling on a razor-thin GOP majority. Joining me now with the latest is the person who did this exclusive interview, the Hill's Alexander Bolton. Alex, thanks for joining us. I mean, what were your biggest takeaways from your exclusive with the minority leader?
Well, I think what was interesting is to sit down with the leader in person and to see that he, despite all the coverage that he's taken, political hits, that his influence in the Senate Republican conference is waning, he seems pretty comfortable and actually quite elated that he got this Ukraine funding bill passed with 22 votes, despite Donald Trump making phone calls, trying to convince Republican senators to vote against it. He said, given all the obstacles, he thought that getting the Ukraine funding passed through the Senate with 22 Republican votes felt like a landslide, in his words. And now he's calling on the Speaker to let the House vote on this Ukraine package. Speaker Johnson says that he wants to add border security provisions to it, something that Senate Republicans tried to do, but eventually decided not to do. McConnell, when I asked him about that, he sighed. And he said, there's a reason we haven't passed immigration legislation all these years. In other words, if Johnson insists on trying to put border language onto this bill, Ukraine funding is just not going to get to President Biden's desk.
Objectively, McConnell's way more influential than the current Speaker of the House. It just, even in terms of the dynamics, and even though he is technically a minority leader, just his influence over Washington, D.C., you can't really even compare the two. One of the things that I thought was so brilliant about this interview that you did, and folks, go click on it at thehill.com, because it truly illustrates not just the politics, but the personalities behind this. Because what Leader McConnell said essentially was two things. First is that he has a personal connection to this as it relates to his father and World War II. And then he also, secondly, put it in a historical context about the Republican Party's history of having a debate within the party about support for foreign countries. What did you find out, Alexander Bolton?
Well, Leader McConnell is an avid student of history, and that's clear when you walk into his office. You can see Henry Clay's portrait on the wall, Teddy Roosevelt's portrait, Ronald Reagan's. I mean, he looks to his predecessors in the Republican Party and he admires those who favored a muscular foreign policy, protecting American power abroad. And for him, it's personal, as he described it to me. He says he still has the letters that his dad wrote to his mom during World War II when his father was a foot soldier in George Patton's army. He said that his father saw the Soviet Red Army face to face in Czechoslovakia after the war. And he wrote to McConnell's mom saying that the Russians are going to be a big problem. And McConnell feels that his dad was right, and we're seeing that right now. And he has a real personal interest here. He thinks the future security of the country is at stake. And what he pointed out to me and emphasized to me is that this debate within the Republican Party that we saw play out so vividly on this Ukraine border security package over the last few weeks has been going back to the 30s. Yep. And he pointed out that Robert Taft, who was Republican senator from Ohio, who ran against Dwight Eisenhower in 1952, who was the most prominent Republican in Washington during the 40s, he opposed the Lend-Lease Act, which allowed FDR to supply to supply weapons, material, food, not troops, but equipment and weapons to the British to fight Nazi Germany. That's something that the top Republican in the Senate opposed in the 40s. Turned out to be the wrong call. Dwight Eisenhower was right. There has been a battle within the Republican Party going back decades. And right now, because Trump is so prominent, because he's the most influential Republican in politics right now, we're now seeing the party swing back to that isolationist bent. And that was something that McConnell observed to me.
And so the last question I'd ask for you is McConnell just celebrated his 82nd birthday. There's been an open question about age in politics. Both President Biden as well as former President Donald Trump are roughly the same age, give or take a couple of years. But based on your reporting and your be sitting down with him, Alexander Bolton, it sounds like Leader McConnell's not going anywhere.
I don't think so. And I think he is banking on Republicans taking back the Senate. That would be a huge boost to him as Republican leader because he scored two very big recruits in West Virginia. The governor, the popular governor, Jim Justice, pushed Joe Manchin into retirement. McConnell is counting on that as a Republican pickup. And then the other coup he scored was convincing former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan to run for the seat being vacated by Senator Ben Cardin. The Hill is that with a poll today showing that Hogan is tied with the Democrats in that race. So if Republicans take back the Senate, McConnell can claim credit, and that'll help him win re-election for another term. His Senate term does not expire until the end of 2026. So he has two after this cycle, after this Congress. I think he would like 2 more years as leader, but he's not making any formal announcement at this point.
The Hill's Alexander Bolton. No one does it better. You should write a book on McConnell because you literally could. I mean, excellent reporting. Thank you, Alexander Bolton, for breaking it down.
Thanks for having me on.